Oh, hey everybody. I was just sitting here listening to the music and waiting for the thing to start and I was just kind of feeling stressed out, like that feeling of stress like there's too much going on and you just can't cope with it. Well, guess what? That's what we're going to be talking about today. That's right. We're going to be talking about ta-da, stress management. What are the causes of stress, the consequences of stress, and more overly, how can we help people deal with stress? Now, I wanted to illustrate stress just a little bit more than my stupid little intro. I want you to watch this fun little clip here and see if this doesn't kind of show you what the stress reaction might be like in an individual. Check this out.
Excuse me. Can I get a headset?
Certainly.
Thank you.
Oh my God, it's disgusting. Yeah.
Miss?
I'll be right there, sir.
Where's your headset?
She's busy right now, but it's coming.
For crying out loud, you're missing important plot points.
Ma'am?
Could you give me a second, sir?
Excuse me. Could I maybe get that headset, please?
Do not raise your voice to me, sir.
I wasn't raising my voice.
Okay, just calm down.
I am calm. I just want my headset.
Sir, our country is going through a very difficult time right now, and if you're not going to cooperate...
I don't know where a headset ties into patriotism.
Is there a problem here, sir?
I don't think so.
Can you come to the back of the plane with me so we can have a talk?
But talk about what? There's not a problem. The steward is just keeps...
Flight attendant.
The flight attendant keeps ignoring me when I ask.
Calm down.
I am calm. What is it with you people?
You people.
Oh, now wait a minute. I don't mean you people. I mean you people.
Sir, I will not tolerate any racist behavior on the plane. This is a very difficult time for our country.
I know that. I'm not a racist. I just want to watch the movie.
I'm only going to say this one more time, sir. Calm down.
I'm calm!
All rise.
What do you think?
Not guilty. It's a no-brainer.
Mr. Busnick, in case 723, assault and battery against a flight attendant, I find you guilty.
Pretty funny stuff, huh? Now you could see who was really stressed out in that situation. It wasn't the guy on the plane, but it was everybody around him, right? And it kind of caused him to get stressed out. But as we work in our organizations, churches, jobs, ministries, what have you, there's a lot of opportunity for stress. And so it's really important for you to understand what it is, what it's about, and how you can help deal with it on a personal level, and as a leader and manager of your organization, how you can help people. Now, I just realized something. I've still got my headphones on, don't I? I'm going to take them off. All right, man, now I really feel stressed out. Let's move right along, though, shall we? It's exceedingly clear that the chronic stress of 21st century living is not a mere inconvenience, but a major problem that needs to be recognized and treated seriously unless we as a society learn to slow down, breathe, examine our values, and change our hectic lifestyle. We will continue to suffer from cardiovascular disease, immune deficiencies, depression, and a host of other illnesses. Further, we will pass these traits and poor coping skills to our children, who could experience even greater suffering given their exposure to severe stress from the first days of life. And it's no secret, we live in an extremely stressful world, don't we? We have competing demands, we have work demands, we have family demands, and the pressure of work to get stuff done in a short amount of time with limited resources, it can all cause stress in ourselves. So we're going to talk about stress. Now, by the way, let me just give a little bit of a background about my presentation. I'm going to be pulling information from our textbook, but I'm also going to be borrowing from Archibald Hart. Now, Dr. Hart is he's a professor emeritus down at the Fuller School of Psychology, one of the founders of that school. And he's done many presentations in our program before, and so over the years I've gleaned from him and borrowed from him. Now, I'm not a psychologist like Dr. Hart is, but I'm going to do my best to present some of his ideas in a way that will help you out. So what is stress? For those in industrial societies, stress often originates in organizations. Stress that originates elsewhere interacts with and affects workplace behavior and performance. Now, the textbook definition of stress, it's an adaptive response moderated by individual differences, a consequence of any action, event, or situation that places special demands on a person. So I like that definition there. It's an adaptive response. In other words, we respond to a particular situation, and it's moderated by individual differences. And we'll talk about this, but some people respond to stress differently than other people. Now, what is a stressor? It's a potentially harmful or threatening external event or situation. Anything that we perceive outside of ourselves that can be a danger could be considered a stressor. Now, you might say, well, a danger, having a disagreement with my boss or with my spouse or something like that, is that really a danger? Well, our body perceives it as a danger. Psychologically, we have a hard time distinguishing between real danger, let's say a stranger coming at you, with a weapon, versus, your boss coming at you with a pile of paper, right? So we know when we rationalize it, we say, yeah, those are a lot different. The one right here is probably not going to cost my life unless he hits me over the head 100 times with it. But realistically, it's more of the stress of the work as opposed to the threat of death. But nevertheless, our minds and our psyches and our bodies react in a similar way. See, so we're not smart enough to make the distinction, and so our bodies produce the chemicals that cause that stress reaction. We'll talk more about the physiology in a bit. So but the thing to keep in mind is we perceive anything that's a threat to us as something that is a stressor. So here's some examples. Being stretched beyond your limits. Extending yourself without adequate time for recovery. The body is designed for camel travel. Over-arousal of your adrenal system. And accelerated dying. So again, we already defined stress here. Now, a model that I think will help us understand this, it's what's called the general adaptation syndrome. It identifies 3 stages of responses to a stressor: alarm, resistance, and exhaustion. The sources of stress, there's a couple of different sources, and there's a couple of different types of stress, and I think this is important. There's what's called eustress, which is pleasurable stress accompanying positive events, as opposed to distress, unpleasant stress accompanying negative events. So the idea here for eustress is that, we all need a little bit of stress to get going, don't we? And there's also stress that comes along with things that we find exciting, like maybe, maybe going on a roller coaster ride, or engaging in some sort of exciting activity. Some of you like to ride motorcycles or water ski or bungee jump, right? Those kinds of things. It's kind of stress, that kind of adrenaline rush that we actually do. We'll actually pay a lot of money to experience that kind of stress, right? So that would be called eustress, as opposed to distress is the kind of stress that comes with unpleasant negative events in our lives, right? So if somebody was pushing, it's funny, we'll pay a lot of money and get a little bit of a rush if somebody's pushing us off of a mountainside when we have a giant bungee cord, strapped to us. But if we don't pay any money and they push us over the same mountain with no bungee cord, that's going to be like negative stress, right? Now, God forbid that should ever happen, but you can kind of see the difference there, right, between the eustress and the distress. Now, this is a model of this general adaptation syndrome, and you'll see in the first stage, from the bottom to the top is our resistance to stress. So at the bottom is low resistance, high resistance, and then from left to right is the sort of time, the beginning of the event to the end of the event. So at the beginning, we're coping, we're doing just fine. And then all of a sudden, the response to the stressful event goes up and we begin to resist. And then at a certain point, when we can no longer respond, we get to that stage of exhaustion. Okay, so it sort of shows how our resistance goes up and in time, eventually, we stress out. Now, I talked a little bit about the physiology, and what happens during a stressful event is that our brain reacts in a certain way, and it produces hormones, and it produces chemicals in our body that help us to prepare for the threat. And so when you think about this sort of in an evolutionary sense, and I don't mean, we were all created from monkeys, but sort of how human beings have learned to adapt, one of the key mechanisms in the brain is called that fight or flight mechanism, right? You're probably familiar with that. So when we're faced with a danger, there's a couple of ways we can deal with that. We can either it's freeze, fight, or flight. We can freeze, I don't want anybody to see me, or we can fight, we can put up our dukes and get ready to fight, or we can flee, we can run away. But the point here is that when we're faced with a dangerous situation, our bodies move into action. And there's something in our brain when the threat is triggered that all of a sudden now signals to the body, get ready to defend yourself, get ready to fight, or get ready to run. And as you know, physically, both of those take a lot of energy, right? So if we're going to fight, we've got to muscle up. If we're going to run, right, we got to muscle up, we got to run. And so all of a sudden, all of the blood rushes to the center of your body, right? So have you ever noticed, like when you get stressed out or you get in a fight or you're sort of panicked, all of a sudden you can't think as well. You sort of get in this fog and you can't really think clearly. Why is that? That's because all the blood in your body, your brain is telling your body, hey, get ready to do something action, get ready to move into action here. And so all the blood in your body moves to your vital organs, for your heart and your lungs and all your vital systems, because those are more important at that point, right? You're not going to have some philosophical conversation and rationalization when you're facing a dangerous situation. So your body says, hey, blood, go to where it needs to go so we can react to this dangerous situation. And so we don't think as well because the blood is not being supplied to the brain. We don't have that leisurely time to reflect. It's time to move into action. But you can see here from this chart that these chemicals, the adrenaline and the noradrenaline, the cortisol and all that jazz, it produces a physical reaction. Now on the upside, it fights the inflammation, increases blood sugar, and increases muscle tension, right? So all of a sudden our muscles are in a better condition to actually fight or run. But the downside here, you'll see in red, is it activates the heart muscles, increases cholesterol rates, blood pressure, increases the heart rate, right? So as our heart rate increases, our blood pressure increases, and our cholesterol raises, right? Now, you probably all recognize those things as negative physical symptoms, right? So nobody wants to have high blood pressure and nobody wants to have increased cholesterol. So people who go under stress for a long time and they don't de-stress can have health problems. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but you can sort of see the physiology of what happens when we get into a stressful situation. Now, this slide shows us what happens over time as we continue to try and cope with stress. And this is called the stress curve. So if you look at the left there, you'll see the onset of stress, and all of a sudden our body begins to produce all these chemicals, right, and all these things. Now, after about 2 weeks of this, we experience prolonged stress, the cortisol starts to change action. And all of a sudden, our ability to cope with stress goes down. Chronic stress, cortisol works to remove you from stress. And so basically what this is saying here is that our body can only handle so much of those increased chemicals and that increased hyperactivity and response mechanism, right? So sure, we can handle a stressful situation for a short season, maybe an hour or two, maybe a day, maybe two. But what happens if we stay in that state of stress and we don't de-stress, decompress, kind of get back to those normal chemical levels, all of a sudden now our brain and our resources begin to feed upon themselves and they literally begin to shut down. And so this is the reason why people enter into burnout and all kinds of chronic issues, is because their brain is being depleted and their body can no longer handle the high levels of stress that's caused by all that activity. Now, people handle stress differently. And you've probably noticed that. You might be somebody that things just fall off your back and you can take things in stride. You might be that kind of person that every little thing that happens causes you to get stressful. Well, guess what? That's a pretty normal thing. Let's talk about the individual differences in stress. And if you recall last week or a couple weeks ago, we talked about individual differences, so I shouldn't have to explain that a whole lot. But here's some of the ones that relate to stress particularly. There's the type A personality profile. These are folks that are extremely competitive, highly committed to work, have a strong sense of time urgency. Okay, so you probably met this person, right? They're always kind of on the go. They're always got to get stuff done. They always feel like they're under a deadline. They're always talking about time and accomplishment, and they're just go, 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 right? Those are type A personalities. And guess what? Those people don't handle stress quite as well. Then you've got the type B personality profile. These people are less competitive, less committed to work, and have a weaker sense of time urgency. And these folks can kind of handle things in stride. They're not feeling stressed out by time pressures. They're more easily able to cope with these sorts of things. Now, you might want to take a second right now and ask yourself, am I kind of a type A? Am I kind of a type B? Now, personally, what do you guys think? I mean, take a guess. You don't know me all that well. But do you think I'm type A or type B? That's right, I'm type B. I'm kind of a chill guy. I don't put a whole lot of pressure on myself. Now, I wouldn't say I'm less committed to work, but you know what? At the end of the day, when it's time to move on, I move on. And sometimes I'll ruminate and stress, and we all have seasons, right, where things, kind of wear us down. We take our work home. But for the most part, I would say that I'm able to handle work and stress in stride. I don't put a whole lot of pressure on myself. And maybe that's why I like higher education. Higher education kind of has seasons and, semesters and breaks and all those kinds of things. Pastoral ministry, now, I've been on church staff long enough to know that there's seasons and then there's seasons, right? You got every week. Right? You got to get ready for that service. And you got to get ready for that midweek service. And then, we've got Easter. We've got Christmas. We've got special events. And, then you've got like the deaths and the births and all the special things that go on in the ministry and the crisis and the community crisis, right? It just seems to never end. And so it's more of a high stress environment. So I guess what I'm saying here is my personality type and the profession which I've chose seem to match up well. Now, we'll talk more about person and job fit here in just a little bit. Now, there's another individual difference here called hardiness, a person's ability to cope with stress. They've identified some people just have this. They have a high level of hardiness, and stress doesn't bother them as much. And how blessed are those people, right, to be highly hardy? You might be one of those. You might say, yeah, I can deal with stress fairly easily. You might be saying, no, I don't have a whole lot of that. And then there's optimism, the extent to which a person sees life in a relatively positive or negative terms, right? So you can see how optimism, if somebody's optimistic, they might see a stressful situation, but they might say, no big deal. We'll deal with it. It'll work out, right? God's on our side. Time's on our side. We'll figure it out. Okay, so people with an optimistic personality can be able to deal with stress better. People that are not optimistic or pessimistic, they're always going to be worried about things, right? So you might kind of be one of those more pessimistic people. You're going to, guess what? The incidents and the effects of stress are going to be more pronounced in your life. Now, there's things in an organizational setting which can cause stress. Let's take a look at some of these. Workplace stress factors, such as task demands associated with the specific job a person performs. Physical demands associated with the job's physical setting and requirements. Role demands associated with the expected behavior of a particular position in a group or organization. And interpersonal demands, group pressure, leadership, personality, and conflicts. All right, so as I already mentioned before, ministry context can be a fairly demanding and stressful kind of environment, right? Not only because of the press of the nonstop events and the weekends and the midweeks and all the things that are going on, but then the dealing with the people and the pressures and the personalities, right? If you're in a church of any size, you probably got a lot of people there that really begin to take their toll on you. Nonprofit work is the same way. If you work in a kind of a relief situation, an aid situation, if you work in as in a chaplaincy situation, law enforcement, right? Just look at some of these jobs, and the demands of these jobs themselves can be very, very demanding. If you're an executive, if you're a key leader, if you're responsible for the entire organization, for making payroll, all those kinds of things, right? You feel that stress upon you, and it begins to wear on you. So when you're a frontline worker, you just kind of punch in and you punch out. maybe a little bit of stress, but once you kind of move up in the organization, now all of a sudden you kind of feel the weight upon you. People are counting upon you. The decisions you make have stronger ramifications, right? You make a decision and, people's lives are in your hands, so to speak. And so this role demand and the interpersonal demands, the group pressure, and all these kinds of things can really begin to take a toll on you and produce stress in your lives. And there's individual stressors in a work context as well. Things like role ambiguity, responsibility for people, the pace of change, harassment, role overload, and role conflict. Now let me ask you this. Have you ever had to deal with crisis people, a close community? Now let's just pause right there for a minute, especially for those of you in ministry, right? We all know that ministry is like working in a fishbowl, right? And especially if you're in leadership, everybody's watching what you do, right? And so this close community, on the one hand, it's a real blessing, but on the other hand, it's like, man, I feel like everybody's kind of watching me and everybody's critiquing me, right? And criticizing me. Did they like me? Did they like my sermon? Did they like the way I handled that? It's just right. It's a stressful situation. Conflicts, work and personal and marital and family, right? So we know that stress, we go to work and there's a certain set of stress, but we also have family stress. And sometimes that family stress can carry over into work, right? So let's just say you have a disagreement with your spouse or your kids or something like that, a parent, right? All of a sudden now it's kind of stress and you bring that into work and it impacts your work performance and it starts to build, it adds into the stress at work. And so now you've got tensions at home and you've got tensions at work. All of a sudden there's no relief, right? Sometimes you go to work and like you can get away from that, or sometimes you go to work and it's worse. Right? So stress, I guess the point I'm saying here is that stress comes at us from all angles. Deadlines produce a lot of stress, lack of boundaries. Now what's a boundary? A boundary is where I say, this is my personal space and, not physically, so to speak, but emotionally, I'm only going to allow you in so much. I'm not going to ask you to demand that much, right? And so people need to set up strong boundaries. I know I'm getting ahead of myself, right? But we have to have personal boundaries where we say yes and no, especially no, right, to the wrong things that are going to cause too much stress in our lives. So people with a lack of boundaries can have more stress because they feel like they need to say yes to everybody. They feel like it's everybody, intrudes upon my personal space, so to speak. Unbalanced living and misguided priorities. Now, some jobs, as you can imagine, are more stressful than others. This probably doesn't surprise you that much to see, right, that things like being a surgeon or a commercial airline pilot or a photojournalist, real estate agent, right? These things are all pretty stressful. Now, why is a real estate agent in there? Well, probably because, if they don't sell a house, they're not going to make any money, they're not going to eat. And because they sell so few houses, it's kind of feast or famine. I've known people in the real estate business before, that's what they tell me. They buy a house, they sell a house, and boom, man, they buy groceries for 2 months because they never know when they're going to sell that next house. Now, look at the least stressful jobs here, things like being an actuary. Now, what's an actuary? These are the people that crunch a lot of numbers for insurance companies, and they deal with a lot of data, and they figure out the correlations between, like, if you're 45 and you don't smoke and you live in the suburbs, you're probably going to live to be 87, as opposed to a smoker who lives in the city, who works in a high stress job. He's probably going to live to be about like 65, right? Okay, so actuaries figure these things out, and then they tell the insurance companies, and they base your insurance policy premium based upon where you are. Okay, so that's an actuary. So, they're just dealing with numbers all the time. There's no stress. These things are kind of changed. It's a low stress job. A dietitian, computer systems systems analyst, statistician, astronomer. Let's see, astronomer, that's a pretty chill job, right? What are you doing? You're looking through the telescope all day, and you're looking at stars and the moon and the sun. You're looking for other planets and stuff like that. That's a pretty chill job. If you're a person that doesn't like the high stress, you should probably become an astronomer, really. Mathematician, historian, software engineer. Now, this is an interesting chart here because it shows the underload-overload continuum. And I know it looks like a big bubble here, but if you look on the left here, you'll see when there's an underload of stress, we experience boredom, there's a decrease in motivation, absenteeism, and apathy. And then there's what's called optimal stress. We have high motivation, high energy, sharp perception, and calmness. And then over on the right, there's overload. And this is where stress gets bad. And we experience things like insomnia, irritability, increased errors, and indecisiveness. Okay, so you might be thinking, man, I want a really chill, no stress job. No, you don't. You want a really chill job, but you want some stress. Because here's the point. If we don't experience some stress, we don't get moving, motivated, and into action, right? So have you ever noticed like sometimes you procrastinate, and you put things off, and all of a sudden it's like, oh man, I forgot. I got to do that thing. It's due tomorrow. And all of a sudden you experience a little bit of stress and you kick into action and boom, project done. Ba-da. Okay, so that's because you needed that stress in order to get, when you had 3 months to do that job, you thought, no problem. Or you're not motivated, you're bored, right? You're checking out. All of a sudden it's like, okay, when the deadline caused a little bit of stress. So there's sort of an optimal level of stress here. So you can tell from this diagram, from like boredom and apathy, lack of motivation to like, oh, I better get moving. I better, deadline's coming up. Things are due here. And then there's like, there's too much stress. I can't handle it. All of a sudden, I'm not efficient anymore, right? I kind of get like, totally stressed out and I become irritable and overloaded. Okay, so that's what this thing is. So the point here for leaders and managers is, when you're helping people manage stress and your own stress, you want to find that sweet spot, right? Not too little, not too much. You want to give them just enough responsibility, just enough time pressure, just enough deadlines where they get motivated and they don't have to wait forever, but they have enough work to keep them going, but not so much where it's going to stress them out. All right, so what are the effects of stress? We talked about what it is. We talked about what causes it. Now, what are the effects of it? Well, first of all, there's physical symptoms. Now, remember I said that the stress, it's not just an emotional reaction, but there's a physical reaction that takes place. It's starting in our brain with the production of the chemicals that leads to other physical symptoms. And so you'll see here that the physical symptoms are things like high blood pressure, headaches, ulcers, heart disease, aches and pains, nervousness, irritability, right? Sometimes we can develop stomach problems when we're under stress. Now, besides the physical symptoms, there are psychological symptoms, things like depression, fatigue, anxiety, and anger. And if you remember back in that little movie clip, right? The guy was calm, and everybody around him was getting stressed out, and all of a sudden, they pushed him just a little too hard, and all of a sudden he became angry and anxious as well. And then he got zapped with that little thing. Now, there's behavioral symptoms as well. Irritation with people, withdrawal, outbursts of temper, and poor sleeping habits. Now, these are not good things, especially if we're in ministry. Why? We always have to be on our A game. We always have to be prepared, to deal with people and their issues and their concerns, right? That's why it's important we understand the effects of stress and we deal with stress. Well, hang on, we're getting there, how to deal with stress. Some of you are already thinking, yeah, this is my life. You are preaching to the choir, man. Hang tight. We're going to talk about how to deal with it in just a little bit. Now, let's talk about burnout. Now, burnout is sort of like the ultimate stress. It's like we're the point where stress has hit you and you can no longer function. So think back to that chart where it showed about the onset of stress, and then all of a sudden the chemicals ramping up, and then our body's ability to deal with it, and we kind of move into that, low place right here. So right over here, this is where that stress, this is where burnout happens, right? And they say after about 2 weeks of unrelenting stress and not dealing with it, we can enter into burnout. And so burnout is described as a psychological process resulting from work stress that results in emotional exhaustion, depersonalization, and feelings of decreased accomplishment. And here are some indicators. The emotional exhaustion, feeling drained by work, feeling fatigued in the morning, frustrated. You don't want to work with other people, right? Now, if you get to that point where you say like, man, people bother me, you might be on the edge of burnout there, right? Now, some of us, are a little antisocial, or, we're not people so much, but like where people begin to bug you when the phone rings and you're like, oh, I can't deal with another person, right? You might be in that emotional exhaustion place from burnout. Then there's depersonalization. We become calloused by the job. We treat others like objects. We don't care about what happens to people, and we feel other people blame us, right? So all of a sudden, we kind of get a little jaded, and we don't treat people with the kind of respect. We don't really care. We're kind of checking out. And then there's low personal accomplishment. We can't deal with problems effectively. We don't have a positive influence on others. We can't understand others' problems or identify with them. And we no longer feel exhilarated by our job. So you might say, boy, a few years ago, before I started, or when I first started, I was excited. I liked people. I liked working here. This was a challenging, exciting environment for me. But after years and years of working and unrelenting stress, you're kind of getting into that burnout stage. And now all of a sudden you're thinking, I don't really like working in here anymore. These people bother me. The work doesn't excite me anymore. I'm no longer motivated by this job, right? It might be beyond some of the things we talked about previously about motivation, but it's because of that onset of increased stress and burnout, that unrelenting stress that leads to burnout. Now, the prerequisite for burnout is high involvement in identification with or commitment to one's job. All right, now, so I'm speaking to all you in ministry right now because this describes you. You have high involvement, high identification with, and high commitment to your job. So people who take their job kind of casually, they come in, they come out, they like it, they do a good job, but it's not them per se, are not as likely to burn out as people who are completely committed, because of their spiritual commitment, their spiritual beliefs, their sense of calling and passion, and they identify with their job. And so there's something known as extreme identification or high job identification. Folks in ministry, whether it's pastoral ministry, nonprofit work, whatever you do, we feel that this work is us. This is who we are. This is what we're about. And because of that, we have a strong sense of identification, which is all great, which is all wonderful. But just remember this. That can be a precursor to burnout, right? Because you feel so committed that you feel obligated to do everything. You feel obligated. You carry the weight of the world. You carry the weight of the ministry on your shoulders. And that can lead to burnout. Now, there's some individual variables that make burnout more likely as well. Women are more likely to burn out than are men. Now, that's interesting. Some people think, men might be more likely. Men have more heart attacks, things like that. But the research shows that women are more likely to burn out than men. Younger workers are more susceptible than olders, and unmarried workers are more likely to burn out than married ones. Okay, so let me just say one more thing about burnout. Okay, it happens a lot in ministry. And again, I know a lot of you are in ministry, you're very committed kinds of people. So I want you to recognize those symptoms. I want you to say, boy, is that me? Is this guy preaching right to me here about the symptoms of burnout? And if so, you need to take this seriously, because my main concern for you in this regard is your long-term success. And everybody wants your long-term success. And believe it or not, your people want your long-term success. And you might think, well, God's called me to do this, and this is my church, and I've got this passion and this calling and this gifting and this opportunity, and that's all true. But you know what? If you don't learn how to deal with the stress and the burnout, you're not going to be there very long. And so you have to learn some of these coping strategies we're going to talk about in just a little bit. So my point right here is, if you recognize any of these things in your own life, I want you to take some serious precautions and some serious reactions to this, okay? Now, how do we recognize stress in some of those people around us on our staff? Well, we might see things like a new pattern of tardiness or absences. Previously gregarious employees become withdrawn. So one guy, he used to be happy-go-lucky and upbeat, and all of a sudden he kind of shuts down, is a little withdrawn. Normally neat, accurate work becomes messy, incomplete, or sloppy. Good decision makers start making bad decisions. Easygoing employees who get along well with others become irritable and discourteous. And normally well-groomed employees neglect his or her appearance, right? So the guy used to be all slick, he used to shave, and do his hair, or the gal used to always do her hair and kind of makeup and all that. All of a sudden they start to come in and are like, hey, what happened? It looks like you didn't even brush your teeth, and hey, did you brush your teeth? Did you comb your hair today? It's like, what's going on with this person, right? So these might be signs that your staff are going through stress. Now, here's a model here that shows individual and organizational coping strategies. So individually, we'll talk about these in a bit here, but things like exercise, relaxation, time management, role management, and support groups are all important to helping you deal with stress. Now, organizational strategies, you might say, okay, well, what can we do as an organization? Well, by some of the institutional programs like work design, work schedules, culture, and supervision. Now, let me just talk about some of these things here for a second. We'll get to these in a minute. But things like work design and schedules and culture, right? Let's talk about schedules. You might be saying, all right, I want to help my people deal with stress. You need to take a look at their schedule. How many hours are they working? Are they getting enough rest? Are they taking their vacation days? Are they taking their sick days? Are they taking lunch breaks, right? Are they working long? If you walk around and you see people all working at lunchtime, and you see people working late, the part of you might go, oh, isn't that great? Our people are so committed. They're working so hard. But guess what? If they do that continually, and I understand there's seasons where we need to all work hard. It's all hands on deck. We're getting ready for something. But if they're doing that day in and day out, and you expect that from them, maybe you're a type A manager and you crack the whip and you expect them to work like that, right? Hey, there's no free-loaders around here. Guess what? If you allow them to do that persistently, you're going to cause stress in their lives. Now, let's talk about culture. And we talked about that in this class earlier on, but you could have a culture of stress. You could have a culture where it's so high performance and so go, go, go and so unrelenting, and everybody just understands that's the way it is around here. We all work 50, 60 hours a week, and you all kind of, yeah, we all work 50, 60 hours a week. Aren't we great? Well, guess what? You're going to burn your people out. You're going to stress your people out, right? So just keep in mind the kind of culture you have might be causing people to stress out and burn out. And then there's other things here on the right called collateral programs, things like stress management programs, health promotion programs, sabbaticals, and other programs. Now, sabbaticals, I know a lot of churches do this. They give the senior pastor sabbaticals. How about giving some of your lower staff sabbaticals every once in a while? Every 2, 3, 4 years, give them another week or two. Let them take a month off. It's not just the senior people that are susceptible to burnout. Some of your hardworking middle management kind of people are susceptible to burnout as well. Health programs, stress management programs, support groups, right? Encouraging exercise. Some organizations do this. They give you 2 half-hour breaks every day to go outside and to walk, right? So you see people walking around the premises, right, for half an hour. And they're also, what are they doing at that time? They're taking the physical break, which is a good stress reliever, and they're developing some social interaction with people. And dealing with having the help and support of other human beings helps us to deal with stress, right? So that's like an easy way. So, hey, everybody, it's 10:30, time for work break. And you walk around and you make sure everybody gets out and walk break. And you make sure everybody gets up and walks around, gets away from their desk for a little bit, right? And they come back and they're all happy, maybe a little sweaty, maybe a little stinky, but they've de-stressed just a little bit. And so other kinds of things, encouraging gym memberships, maybe getting a corporate gym membership, or maybe saying, hey, 3 days a week, you guys can come in 1 hour later because I want you to go to the gym in the morning. I'm telling you, you would see so much productivity if you started a program like that where you expected them to go to the gym several days a week and you gave them some time to do it. How great would that be? Now, one of the reasons that people stress out in the job is because they don't have a very good person-environment fit. So in other words, their personality, coping skills, passions, all those kinds of things don't fit in with the job they're doing. And there's different ways to look at it. There's the person-organization fit. In other words, are they a good fit for your organization? Person-vocation fit. Are they good for that particular job, right? Person-job fit, the specifics of the job, the specific tasks, and then the group fit. Do they actually fit in with that group of people? So as leaders, it's important for you to see if you see people are stressed out, it might be because, first of all, they don't belong in your organization because they're not a good fit, or they're doing the wrong job. And you might say, this is a quality person. We really want them. Well, maybe find a job that's a better fit for them, right? Let them contribute in another way. They'll be happier, you'll be happier, and it'll be a win-win. How can we help people with these person-job fits from the beginning? A realistic job preview. This is important. Sometimes we really sell our organization. Oh, come here, it's going to be great. We're going to change the world together. You need to be realistic and say, yeah, it's great. We're going to change the world. But, it's kind of a high-demanding job. It's a high-stress job. There's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of things you have to juggle all at once, right? So let them know what it's like, because if it's just, for example, go back to some of those individual differences. If they're kind of a low hardiness, low optimism kind of person, right? Not conscientious, all these kind of personality things that don't let them deal with stress well, they might not be a good fit for your organization. They might self-select out, or you might have to self-select them out. You can do testing and selecting programs, socialization into the organization, closely linking personal predispositions to the aspects of the job, right? So looking at how they are, their personality differences, and how that's going to match with the job, and whether this is a good job or maybe they should have a different kind of job that's not going to be as stressful for them. All right, now we're coming down the home stretch here, and I promised you I was going to talk about how to deal with stress in a Christian way. I know our textbook talked about meditation. We're not going to talk about meditation here. In fact, if you want, you could just kind of rip that part of the textbook out. I didn't really appreciate that book, or that page of the book. I didn't appreciate the fact they didn't say anything about praying, right? They just sort of assume we're all Zen Buddhists, right? Well, really, how many people are Zen Buddhists? They want to kind of do that thing. I'm getting off on a tangent here. So let's talk about a Christian response to dealing with stress and burnout and those sort of things. Okay, so I'm going to give you some real practical things. A lot of this is from Dr. Hart's material and from his many, many years of experience dealing with high stress, type A kind of personalities and pastors who tend to suffer from burnout. Okay, so let's see if these help us as well. Now, the first thing I want to say here is set boundaries to your work. Know when you're on duty and when you're off. Now, remember we talked about high job identification, right? And high commitment. Ministry is a high commitment, high identification type of job. You have to say when you're on and when you're off. Now, a lot of us today, have like cell phones, and we have all this technology that allows us to be connected 24/7. And I know how tempting it is when we go home to let's see if I got that email. Let's see if I got that text. Especially if you're in ministry, if you're in a high connected kind of job, you need to learn how to turn that stuff off. You need to put that phone down. You need to turn it off. You need to tell your people, hey, I'm not available from 6 in the evening until 8 o'clock the following morning. All that day you can contact me, you can text me day in and day out, but unless somebody's life is in jeopardy, I don't want you to text me or expect to get in touch with me or call me during these other hours. You, and only you, can say this. They're not going to say, hey, we got a guard pastor or whatever. You have to say, I'm off duty these times because I'm preventing myself from stress buildup. Here's another one. Resolve conflicts quickly. Festering conflicts are huge stressors, right? So let's just say you got a personality conflict with a staff person, an elder, a board director, something like that, somebody on the board of directors, parishioner, customer, whatever line of work you're in. If you got a stress thing, if you got a conflict thing going on, deal with it right away. Because as you carry that thing around, everything else is kind of affected by that. So, I encourage you, deal with conflicts soon, deal with them quickly, deal with them early. I know it's not easy. I know it's difficult. I'm not saying it is easy. But if you want to minimize the stress in your life, you got to deal with those conflicts, because those conflicts become huge stressors. They're weights on our souls, they're weights on our lives, and you're going to add to the stress in your life if you don't deal with them quickly. Take care of unpleasant tasks first and get them out of the way, okay? This is simple advice. If you know you've got something difficult to do that day or something that's, kind of weighing on you, just take care of it, and you'll feel the weight of the world lift up, right? So, today I've got to deal with, I got to talk to somebody about something. It's a critical thing. I got to talk to an employee about a bad situation. Let's just say it's a performance situation. I got to talk to them. I got to do some correction or something like that. Do that like 9 o'clock in the morning. Show up, have your coffee, check an email or two, and then sit down and have that meeting. And then it'll take, it'll be done, and then the rest of the day, mentally and emotionally, you're freed up from the stress. If you say, oh, let's take care of that like at 4:30 today. Well, let's face it, 4:30, our energy level's down. We're already thinking about the evening. We're getting hungry, right? And moreover, you've carried around the stress of that unpleasant thing for another 8 hours longer than you really had to, right? So get the stressor out of the way early, and it'll free up your capacity. Inoculate yourself to stress. Don't take things so seriously. Try to understand where others are coming from, and don't take matters too personally, and learn to forgive quickly, right? Okay, so sometimes we bring stress on because everything is so important to us. Oh my gosh, I'm the pastor. Oh my gosh, I'm the CEO. If I don't deal with this, if I don't do this correctly, the world is going to end, right? And the book talked about sort of our cognitive perception, changing our cognitive perception, and doing a realistic assessment of the consequences of this situation, right? So what happens if you don't make that deal? What happens if you don't make as much money? Or what happens if this person does leave? Or what happens if this situation does? What is really going to happen? I mean, barring a disaster or something really horrible happening and the roof caving in, you're probably going to live, right? At the end of the day, you're going to live. Jesus still loves you. He's still on the throne, and you're going to live. You're going to be okay, right? So sometimes we have an unrealistic idea of what the consequences of things are, and so therefore we bring the stress on. So don't take things too seriously. Understand other people's points of view, right? Sometimes we're so adamant that our point of view is the right point of view. Take a few minutes and say, maybe they've got a point there. Don't take things too personally. Remember, it's not always about you. Somebody might do something and you go, boy, they really blew me off. No, they were just in a mood. They were just having an issue. Had nothing to do with you. I heard Pastor Jack say one time something to the effect of, we'd stop worrying about what people think about us so much if we realized how little they did, right? So in other words, like, people aren't thinking about you. People aren't talking about you. You're not the center of their universe. You're the center of your universe. But chances are they're not thinking about you. They don't care about you, at least in that sense, right? They care about you as a human being, but, you're not the center of their universe, right? So we kind of have this constellation where we think like we're at the center of everybody else's world. Well, guess what? You're not, right? So if you realize that, you'll be less stressed out because they're not thinking about you. And then learn how to forgive quickly, right? And I think the Bible says something about that. As we foster in forgiveness, we foster that kind of anger and conflict, in our spirits, that leads to stress right there, right? And there's actually been psychological studies done of people that don't forgive and the stress that it causes them, right? And we know people that are old and bitter, right, because they never learned how to forgive. Another, saying I've heard about this is not forgiving is like drinking poison expecting the other person to die, right? We drink the poison. We're the ones dying. It doesn't hurt them. It's not hurting them by you not forgiving them. Learn how to forgive people. Managing your adrenaline. Be willing to externalize your concerns. What does that mean? Talk to somebody. Journal about something. Speak your mind. Sometimes we get stressed out because we bottle things up inside, so learn how to externalize them. Share, express yourself. Change your hurried personality so you communicate peacefulness. Choose your battles and your emergencies where you will need your adrenaline. Okay, so you might say, today I got 3 things to deal with, and this one's really important. I'm going to kind of let those ones slide for right now. I got to save I only got so much energy today. I only got so much adrenaline I can expend. I'm going to expend it on that one. Learn a good relaxation technique and develop a relaxing hobby, right? So learn how to relax. Learn how to chill. Find something you like doing. Now, you know what? In my office, I got a mandolin in my office. I know I got some guitars right here, but in my office at work, I've actually got a mandolin hanging up there. And whenever I got a little break, a little time, maybe at lunch or at the end of the day, I'll just pick that bad boy up and crank out a couple fiddle tunes. It's relaxing. It's fun. It helps me take my mind off of work. Now, a lot of pastors do things like play golf or, whatever it is. Whatever your hobby is, learn how to do it, right? And do it regularly and stay committed to that because that's a relaxation thing for you. And plan for recovery time when you're in a high demand period. Okay, so for a lot of people in ministry, Sunday is a high demand period. And some churches give pastors Monday off. But here's the thing, Monday, and if you've been in ministry any length of time, you notice this. That's a down day. That's a depressed day because you've been putting out all day on Sunday. And all of a sudden Monday, you're just like stressed out. Why is that? Because all that adrenaline from Sunday and all that activity. And now Monday, your body is physically depleted. You're sort of in that low capacity zone because you physically and mentally you don't have the resources. Guess what? Don't use that as your cherished day off. go in on Monday and do some easy kind of work. Do some of your paperwork, some of your routine things, get caught up on emails, just kind of chill. And then take a good day off. Take Friday off, right? When you're actually kind of in a good mood and you've got a lot of energies and you're not all burnt out from the weekend before you. You'll enjoy that day more, you'll have more energy, and it'll be a good thing. So not everybody can do that, but if you can manage your schedule and don't take that Monday burn-off day off, because you don't do anything good on that day, do you? You stay home, you're depressed, you're discouraged. Oh my gosh, that was the worst sermon I ever preached. Everybody was at me about this and that, right? Is that really the one day of the week you want to take off, is when you're recovering from that? Be firm about your recovery times. Sabbath, rest times, day off, vacation, right? These are so important. And again, us high committed, high, type A personalities have a hard time doing this, but you got to be intentional. Now think about the Sabbath, right? Everybody. In Scripture, we know that even God himself took the seventh day off, right? He created the world and he took the seventh day off. And the people in Israel were commanded to take a day off, one day a week. And the committed Orthodox Jews to this day do not do a stitch of work on the Sabbath, which for them is Saturday, by the way, but they get everything ready Friday, and then Friday at sundown, boom, that's it. They won't even turn off a light switch. They'll have to get a Gentile to turn the light switch on and off for them, because that's considered work. They don't drive cars. Now, you might not be an ultra-Orthodox Jew, but the point is here is give yourself a Sabbath. And again, maybe it's not Sunday because you're working, especially if you're in ministry, you're working, but you have to have at least one day off. And here's what Dr. Arch Hart said about this. In order to recover, these recovery times, you should have one night, each day you should have one night recovery, right? That's a good night's sleep. Each week you should have one day off, right? That's the Sabbath. And then I believe every quarter you should take a long weekend, and every year you should take a couple of weeks, right? So we have regular built-in recovery periods. Every day it's a good night's sleep. Every week it's a Sabbath. Every quarter it's a long weekend, maybe a 3-day weekend. And then every year it's a 2-week, maybe even 3-week vacation if you can manage that, right? So plan a recovery period in conjunction with the time of stress that you're going through. Keep your adrenaline arousal to a minimum. Learn to enjoy a little boredom. And again, we're so stressed. There's so much. We've all got our cell phones, right? And we have 2 seconds off, right? We're waiting in line or waiting in traffic. What do? Oh, let me check my email. Oh, let me send a text. Oh, I just remember this. Learn to enjoy a little bit of boredom. It's okay. If you're a little bit of boredom, that means all of a sudden your body is relaxing a little bit. And if you're not bored, it means you're always in that high stress kind of state, right? So it's okay to be bored. It's okay to sit there and just kind of let your mind kind of go, drift off for a little bit, because that means you're not adding in one more moment of stress. You're not adding more adrenaline into your system. Change your type A behaviors. Maintain open and healthy relationships. Resolve conflicts by addressing them openly and honestly. And I talked a little bit about that earlier, about dealing with conflicts early in the day. Well, just dealing with conflicts, generally speaking, is important, right? So as we keep our relationships healthy and open communication, and we're transparent, and we're humble, right? All those things as Christians we're supposed to be, that will help reduce the stress that conflict brings in our life. And then make sure you get enough sleep. And Dr. Hart is really big on this one. In fact, he wrote a whole book. I'd encourage you to get it. It's called Sleep. It Does a Family Good, right? So if you're not getting enough sleep in your life, chances are you're not getting that recovery that you need from the stress in your life. Learn to be tolerant of others. They're not perfect, and neither are you. Resign as the keeper of the universe and focus on that which God has given you to do in your part of his work, right? And again, some of us high committed people feel like the weight of the world's on our shoulders, our city's on our shoulders, our denomination is on our shoulders. It's not. Be faithful to what God has asked you to do, and don't worry about the rest of it. God's got other people. He's not putting the weight of the world on your shoulders. He's in charge of the universe. You are not. And then develop a close support group with who you can be honest and open in discussing your problems. Isolation is the greatest stressor of all, right? So we all need people. I've heard it said that silence, that pain has a lot to do with silence. We feel pain, we feel stress because we're not sharing, we're not dealing with things openly and honestly. So find people that you can trust, your peer group. And, ideally find people it's not about work. A lot of people hang out with their work friends so much and they talk about work and they talk about the stress of work. Find a support group that has nothing to do with your work. Maybe it's people you have a hobby with, or people you do something with, but something just to get your mind off of work, and people that you can talk to openly and honestly. And then I already mentioned a little bit about the importance of sleep. I'm not going to talk a whole lot about this. I do encourage you to get Dr. Hart's book. I think it'll help you a lot. And the spiritual antidotes for stress, let me end with this. Remember this: God is never impatient, so learn tolerance from him. Keep regular devotional times with him, and you'll never be tempted to run ahead of him. And remember this: stress management is a spiritual discipline. So as we learn to deal with things in a godly, effective way, as we keep our prayer life, our spiritual life fervent, we'll be able to deal with the stress. God is not asking you to do all these things. You're putting all these stresses on yourself. So learn to live in harmony with God and not taking off more than you chew. Learn to give your cares to the Lord. Cast your cares upon him, for he cares for you, right? There's a scripture that says that. Anyhow, that's about it. I know this video was kind of long, but I hope this was helpful. I tried to put a lot of stuff in here. I know this is an important topic for a lot of folks in ministry and in work in general. We all deal with a lot of stress. So, blessings to all of you. Praying for all of you guys all the time, and I'll see you online.